Well, hello there. Been a while. A little while there. I've just been celebrating the holidays like a madman. Good God. Holidays. The golden day. We should just start this one again. These are from 19th of December, this one was. So, couple weeks. House hasn't been empty. I'm never going to record one of these when there are people listening. Good God, that's not the intention at all. If anyone ever hears it. Although, last one, I gave it a name based on a joke that I made about my dad's forgetting the name of one of my auntie and uncle's dogs, and one of their dogs was called Tess, so I said, is the other one called Tickles, and you can get it like Testicles, because Tickles is a dog's name. And what I didn't think, because I just named the video Tess and Tickles, and what I forgot is that there was that documentary not long ago where the guy tried to hunt down this weird kind of tickle fetish, not conspiracy, but tickle fetish, like underground. I don't know what words. I'm not doing too well with words at the moment. I haven't been reading enough, I guess, and I'm starting to lose which ones I'm looking for. But the video got 51 views, so all of a sudden someone found my thing. But luckily they were looking for some nice tickling videos to, touch themselves to. And I doubt I satisfied that desire. Am I talking about suicide? Right. Where do we start? Oh, so this one was started when my sister said something about gender that kind of, as Sam would say, I had a emotional reaction to as doubt. What did she say? She said something. Maybe I'll write it down in a minute. But she said, "Sex is between your legs, and gender is between your ears." And I think it just needed a bit of revising, and I later did revise it. I think I said sex is between your legs and gender and sex are between your ears. I think I'll go into it here to try and cover my arse. Okay. I've been thinking about gender quite a bit recently, and I think I've spotted the fundamental errors with both extremes on the matter. Those extremes being gender describes the way a person should behave based on their biological sex, and those who believe gender is purely a social construct without any link whatsoever to biological sex. The first group are making an error I know Hume to have been strongly against. You can't get an ought from an is. Although Sam Harris is known to have a few quarrels with this theory, which I happen to agree with, namely, you can't have an is without subscribing to certain oughts. Anyway, I believe the science is fairly clear on biological differences that go beyond the outward appearance and genitalia. And even if the broad psychology is the same, if you're willing to accept the two facts that hormones affect mood, and different hormones are present in different amounts between the sexes, then there will undoubtedly be some discernible character traits prevalent more often in one sex than the other, and therefore allowing behavioural distinctions to be made, creating genders. This is where Hume comes in. At no point does this mean anyone can be told they should behave according to these broad, more common character traits of their biological sex. It simply does not follow. The idea that boys should like blue, girls should like pink, makes no sense. The boys will know which colour they like, and whichever one they do like is fine. Of course, it's preferable if the colour they like isn't the blood of those who have. Of course, it's preferable if the colour they like isn't the blood of those who have wronged him, and one might suggest that he shouldn't like that colour, but that's a slightly different problem, and perhaps my language barrier theory has reared its ugly Kopf. Wow, well, he's so clever. You just put Kopf in there because you're talking about language, and Kopf is German for head, and you would have said head otherwise. Wow. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have another failure of logic, which goes a little something like this. These people believe that you can't not have an ought unless there wasn't an is in the first place. Now, that's some clever wording there, Ollie. That is... Come on, when I thought that, I thought I might have been clever, but probably not. That's probably a smart way to say that. Which is probably to not say it at all. Clearly this, quote-unquote, logic would only arise in reaction to the nonsense outlined before. But hopefully it is obvious why this too doesn't follow reality or reason. To finish, gender does not exist. Oh, oh God. Well, I'm probably satisfying both people now by saying both. To finish, gender does exist, and like everything ever, it is technically a social construct. Science is a social construct under a certain definition. Football, curtains are all social constructs if your definition is anything which uses consensus to differentiate between different trends in behaviours, activities or objects. All gender can be used for is tell an individual how they are likely to experience the world and themselves based on the tell an individual how they are likely to experience the world and themselves based on the inclinations common to their sex. It may even tell them how they are likely to behave in certain situations based on these inclinations, but it cannot ever tell them how they ought to or should behave, nor can it ever tell them with certainty how they will feel, etc. All individuals are different. Oh, what a beautiful little ending. But basically what I'm getting at, they're fucking hell, it took me 6 minutes to get through. Good God. Jesus Christ. What I'm getting at is things like testosterone and estrogen are going to affect your mood slightly, so you can be expected to behave differently, when your emotions are the primary cause of certain things. But like, I think higher levels of testosterone correlates with increased levels of aggression in males, probably. Also, males are generally way more. So I don't know. Anyway. I'm just saying, there are going to be trends, but it doesn't mean if you don't fit the trend that you're not whatever you want. Oh, God, Jesus. Right? Thank you. Lord. I'm not insane, by the way. I'm just doing a joke. That's not me actually thinking there's someone else present. Good God. What was I up to? Let's see. I think this might be a long one because I've been, stockpiling. I've stated before why the phrase "treat others as you would wish to be treated" is useful but doesn't quite work, and isn't at all inclusive. Citing masochists as an example, perhaps the obvious alternative. I'm just going to try and read the words instead of thinking about things. Perhaps the obvious alternative is treat others as they would wish to be treated. This too has its flaws, in that it relies upon a person's intuition and ability to empathise and interpret the wants and needs of others, and humans are in many ways the ultimate black box. Sometimes what people really want, I'm using myself and my behaviour as the basis for this, as I am guilty of the exact thing I'm about to describe. Sometimes what they really want is nothing like what they explicitly say they want, and sometimes even the very opposite. This main flaw is one I believe... Why can't I read just words? This main flaw is one I worry about less than those of the alternative. The common phrase seems only advantageous in trying to tame genuine psychopaths. I feel like I'm talking a lot slower than I usually do. I've been told multiple times in my life that I talk very fast. I think today I'm talking rather slow. Oh, this was a funky little thing. I think I was watching it. Yeah, I don't think I know. I was watching Emmerdale, and some guy got put in prison, and there was some kind of thing happened, and made me think about. Imagine a priest would tell him to seek salvation, because once you're in prison, most people, I imagine many people, just kind of imagine their life is over. And then, they'll become more religious and they think, oh, actually it's all worthwhile. Their life in prison is going to be just as valuable as their life outside of prison, because they're seeking salvation from the Lord. But really, you can seek salvation in an atheistic sense, or a secular sense, or whatever word you want to change in there. And this is the way I pictured someone doing that in a TV show. You should seek salvation. Not from the... I don't know, I've just turned him Scottish just because I wanted to be clear that it's a character in a TV show. Not from the man up there. And he points to the sky. But the man up there. And he redirects his finger towards his head. Yeah? Or, it could be a woman up there. It could be a woman for a man. It could be a man for a woman. Do whatever you want. But the idea is, there might not be a man up in the sky, yeah, watching over you, but there is that little man or woman or nondescript in your head, which is you, your conscience, yeah, Dumbo, right? Or is it Pinocchio? Or Dumbo, I think, with the conscience thing. Cricket conscience. Let's get out of that and never talk about it again. On the repugnant conclusion. Now, this one I should preface by saying I've only heard brief descriptions of it by people on Sam Harris's podcast, so I don't actually know anything about it. So my supposed solution from me, who knows nothing about anything, is probably a load of bullshit. And someone like Derek Parfit. So I started reading Derek Parfit's Reasons and Persons, and he starts off right away by basically tackling the very thing that started this whole thing off of my, it's kind of self-interest theory, but he starts off by, I've written a load of notes in the thing, kind of arguing with him, but then I'm not sure if it's kind of the point I'm up to. It seems like he's agreeing with it an awful lot of the time. He's trying to prove how something can be, I can't remember the exact word he used, not self-disproving, but something like that, and kind of flips back and forth by saying that it is and isn't. I think ultimately he says that it isn't anyway. But yeah, there are a few things I think he made mistakes in, but we'll see. On the repugnant conclusion, the reason this fails, at least if I remember the premise correctly, I believe the idea is that if you apply the formula slightly decrease individual happiness / goodness of life and increase the number of lives. What the fuck? Until eventually there is a ridiculous number of people living miserable lives. Okay, that was just me writing down the premise with some weird grammar. This fails for reasons twofold. One, what gets lost along the way, presumably because we are not computers capable of tracking every iteration, is that the amount of happiness / goodness across all lives must either remain equal or increase. This can be seen very easily in the first iteration. One very happy person, say 10 out of 10 on the happiness scale, is worth less to the equation than two ever so slightly less happy people, each at say 9 out of 10, because collectively they amount to a total of 18, which is a bigger number than 10. Wow, aren't you really condescending? I was wondering whether it would just be that, a matter of summing them, probably be a bit more, because, I don't know, anyway. It's a bit good to be true. Anyway, one other thing that must remain throughout the iterations is that the happiness / goodness quotient must remain positive. Assume 0 is equal to non-existence, although this is hard to actually assert because really non-existence would occupy a parallel number line. The repugnant conclusion cannot be reached unless the happiness / goodness quotient drops below 0. Because not only then would each individual be suffering an existence worse than non-existence, but also the collective total would be even further from 0. Which brings us on to another point, the idea of a dystopia in which one or a few individuals must suffer the most unbearable existence in order for the rest of life to live a sublime existence. This, if all limitations are correct, is not a true dystopia, and is morally sound, provided the rest of existence is unaware of the suffering few, as this would affect the non-sufferer's experience, and perhaps reduce their happiness / goodness to a point at which it was not mathematically viable for the others to suffer. Then it is sound. Okay, if that doesn't happen, then it's sound. If this predicament of a few suffering some amount maximizes the total amount of goodness in the system to a higher amount than any alternative, then it would in fact be the best option. What else has been forgotten in the repugnant conclusion, which is equally as repugnant in its reasoning, oh God, I tried to make a little quip there, I'm messing up. What else has been forgotten in the repugnant conclusion, which is equally as repugnant in its reasoning, is that the total well-being of the population, much like wealth, which is equally forgotten, can increase. So well-being and wealth across all individuals, just the total amount of wealth in the system and total amount of happiness and well-being in the system can increase. And this only has real benefit when the population is increased. A certain threshold for both happiness and wealth can be met, at which point any further increase to an individual is surplus to requirements. So if we took all the wealth in the world today but just reduced the population to one person, he would have the same amount of wealth would be present in the world, but it would be surplus to his requirements. So you can only get the benefit of having that much wealth by having a sufficient population number. Yeah. Same goes for well-being in this hypothetical scenario where you're able to toggle happiness and well-being. Anyway, in exchange for population. There you go. That's some things there that I've said. What's next? Religions should be opt-in, not opt-out. Wow, that's a really original idea. Humour is my defence and often offence mechanism. What is the purpose of getting offended? Oh, this was another discussion I had with Nash there. Yes. What is the purpose of getting offended? I believe, actually, I had this one with my uncle as well, who sometimes can be a deep thinker, but, sometimes he's a worthy adversary. Oh, yes. No, I feel like a right dick saying that. We were just fucking talking about this thing, my sister and my auntie and my uncle. And we were just clearly so sophisticated. Yeah, sophisticated. You're clearly so sophisticated that you say sophisticated like a fucking idiot. Stupid, plastic idiot. What is the purpose of getting offended? I believe much like pain, being a memory catalyst, and almost anything we consider a visceral reaction, it is a shortcut that reduces the cognitive stress that would otherwise be required to seek a desired outcome if Daniel Kahneman's Mode 2 mind was utilised. It is the offloading of the workload from Mode 2 to Mode 1. When you get offended, you cause yourself to behave in certain ways, and this behaviour will alter the likelihood that the thing that offended you will happen again. This may be the offender picking up on your body language, or you choosing to spend less time with them, or any number of things. So basically, I really didn't go into enough detail that I should have done. I think I was walking somewhere. I know I was. A lot of these kind of gut reactions and visceral reactions to things, like an emotional reaction, like Sam says, doubt, you would reach a similar conclusion if you were to think deeply about them, but it takes up a lot of cognitive stress and time to do that, so it's more efficient and effective, not effective but realistic to achieve. So if you get offended, something's happened which for whatever reason doesn't fit into your genes idea. Well, it gets a bit more complicated than that, but of what is best for you in the long term. And you could think your way out of solution, into a solution, but it's much easier if you just have a kind of set response that haphazardly almost has a likelihood of reaching that same conclusion. It's like it's a payoff, right? You exchange the time and effort it would take to solve the problem properly for getting it done quickly, and it might not work out perfectly, but it's a trade-off. That's what I meant instead of paid-off. God, I really didn't cover that well. So you're trying to when you're going through life, you're like trying to traverse this landscape, trying to find the best route through it, and using your Mode 2 thinking, your slow thinking, would be one way of finding a solution, but it wouldn't be a very good solution either, because it would take up all the time, more time than you had to actually do other things. So there you go. So that's what I think getting offended does. I think it gives you a quick, based on past experiences of not even your own being, but of previous iterations of your germline and whatnot, works, doesn't it? Get offended, maybe you change, maybe you change the way you behave, maybe you change the way other people behave, whatever, something changes that you would likely change if you thought about it enough to realise why. There you go. Fucking hell, Jesus Christ. God, I'm a fucking spastic, I tell you. And people don't like the word spastic, but I'm trying to get to a place where words shouldn't be that offensive, man. I mean, they should be able to make change, but that doesn't mean I think that should be achievable, even with even if they don't, actually hurt someone, literally hurt them, which is a shame that they do. It comes back to my old evolution of swear words. Hopefully I'm right about that. So in Doctor Who, the terrible Doctor Who thing, there are a few things I don't like about Doctor Who, and I feel like I'm treading a dangerous line whenever I talk about them, because I really don't like the new assistant. I hadn't seen any of it, but I just saw in this one, but apparently she's dead. I don't know. Because her character, I'm glad that they brought in a lesbian character for a change, but then it's clear that that's her only redeeming quality, that they just have to keep mentioning it all the time. And I doubt that's her fault. I think it's just the writers feeling the need to overcompensate for not having enough lesbian or less common sexual and gender people. If you come up with better words in your head for what I'm saying, then use them. Ollie, God, never mind. That was just a little idea for the way people should act and things. I don't actually think anyone's going to listen to this. Anyway, God. Or something like, Peter Capaldi just seemed like he wasn't really into it at all. The writing of the story was just pretty terrible. And it used to be kind of a little bit philosophical, the old ones with... what ones did I think? There was the old alternate reality one with Rose Tyler, and apparently I brought this up with my friends, and I think they said that she became a dog, which I don't remember, but yeah, I think that might be right. Anyway, at one point, the old Doctor, so they brought back someone who's meant to look like the original Doctor, said something like he started out because he wanted to find out why there is good in the universe, because bad should always win, and that just really didn't sit well with me. So I tried to come up with why good would win, and I think it's pretty obvious, really. And I've written it here as the essence of goodness is something like this, but that's not really the right wording. The correct wording is in answer to what he said, which is the reason good wins in the universe, and I'll just read is because of symbiosis and emergence, I believe, partly. I think they're the two beneficial reasons, and I think but you can also flip that on its head and say what makes something good, and I think it's mostly those two qualities. I've also said before how it's kind of constructive rather than destructive things. It's what we do for describe things. Anyway, Ollie, you've talked about this before, about how I'm changing because I keep saying you know, and it sounds like I could be talking to people that I think are listening, but really I also say that it's just me. So the essence of goodness is something like the combination of symbiosis and emergence, or rather the reason good wins over bad. There we go. But I've said before how good and bad are just human constructs, which is fine. I'm not saying that means that we have to get rid of them. It makes no sense to say that. It's not like gender is a social construct, therefore it doesn't exist. Never mind. Good and bad wouldn't exist in a universe where humans didn't exist, in the sense that if there was no one there, it's the old tree falling in a forest, right? No one there to hear it. If a universe explodes, if there's no life in the universe and things that we would call bad happen, are they bad? Well, only if we're there to see them. So it's a failure of the phrasing of the question, really. Similarity between the Star Trek teleportation thought experiment and growing up. When we're younger, we might want desperately never to grow up to be concerned with certain things, e.g., I never want to be the kind of person who listens to classical music. I've made that person sound stupid, but that was kind of me, and I kind of don't like the fact that sometimes I listen to classical music to read just because I don't really like it. It is a bit pretentious. But as we age, it is possible for this intention to be lost and even entirely reversed. I wish I'd listened to classical music when I was younger. However, because the change is so gradual, and the main observer of the change is also the subject of the change, and thus change with it, we don't notice it happening. The two people cannot objectively be said to be the same person, and if that younger individual was told they would be instantaneously converted to the older person, they would fear it greatly, and imagine that they themselves would be deleted, which is much the same case that happens in the Star Trek teleportation thought experiment. Anywho, yeah. Oh, the Sam Harrison, Ben Shapiro podcast, that was an interesting one. See, Ben Shapiro, man, I mean, I felt like he really did get a bit beaten up in that one, but I know that's just my inclination because I never really liked him before, but maybe they see it the other way, the Ben Shapiro-ites. But man, and Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein, they're pretty fucking smart, man. I think Eric is probably a little bit. I like Brett Weinstein's whole gene stuff, but that poor guy, he was put on the sideline because he was having to be the smart guy, kind of, he was like mediating between Sam and Sam was obviously fucking smart as well, I think. But, and I'm not saying Ben isn't smart, but it's just some things where, hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Ben was the smart one and I was just missing all his stuff. But I think he was kind of missing quite a lot of what Sam was saying. When talking about free will in the Q&A bit of his podcast with Ben Shapiro and Eric Weinstein, Sam says that you don't know how. Sam says that you don't know how you will respond to certain stimuli or how much you will take on board. And while I believe this is an entirely true and factual statement, it might be better understood by the unreachables. I tried to come up with a better name with that, but it's not quite derogative enough. With the caveat of, even if you do know how you react, or even if you do know how you will react, your knowing or not knowing is out of your control. Okay. And the guy who asked what book would we give to an alien with no moral code in place of the Bible. For one, we don't need to worry about the hypothetical alien situation because it's too hypothetical. The better example, which he also gave, was of supposedly successful missionary settlements. I say supposedly because I'm not sure. All those initiated in third world countries are especially helpful thanks to their prohibitions about contraceptives. Los Angeles was the example they gave, I believe. What we so-called atheists are saying is give them the Bible if you really want. If you want to do the laziest and most inefficient job you can, improve it slightly by taking out all the bullshit. Call it the abridged Bible, but don't actually call it that, because then they'll look for the unabridged version. Better yet, give them all the books with far better moral lessons written long after the Bible was. And better yet, edit them to be the most up-to-date as possible also. This book idea is antiquated. One book is not a good idea. We, by essence of the very occasion he raised this point at, meaning the live podcast and the podcast and all that, are constantly editing the ever-learning book in our minds. But realistically, so we all have this kind of book of morality in our heads, and it's ever-changing is what I'm saying there. It's not really a book, but it's just like a metaphorical book there. But realistically, if you want to take the what book idea literally, you'd give them some sort of science for dummies book, some books on moral philosophy, books on engineering and economics, and loads of other books that would actually help build a society, not a fucking book about Jesus. The Bible doesn't earn brownie points for being a supposed amalgam of insight in just enough areas and condensing its guidance into a short book. Its shortness doesn't make up for its wrongness, and its inefficiency in laying out the groundwork for the society it claims to have produced is also not made up for by its shortness. Anyway, this is getting very long now, so I'm going to end it immediately, because I might not be able to send it over to my email address. Bye!